Earth to control tower. Do you hear me okay? Okay. All right, come on in. Find your favorite seat, even if it doesn't have your name sewn on it. All right, Gideon anxiously awaits your attention. Thanks for coming today. We're going to continue our adventure with Gideon in just a minute, and we'll talk about everybody's favorite topic about Gideon, that's the fleece. Before we do, let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you so much for this beautiful day today. We appreciate everyone that's here. We appreciate you having so much for us to learn in your word. Today we'll be studying about Gideon and how you dealt with him, and it's amazing what we can learn from your word from the Old Testament and apply it to our lives today. We appreciate that. It's just another evidence of your genius. We pray that you'll be with us. We pray that you'll be with all the teachers this morning, that we bring your word correctly to those that have come here to hear it. Help us to see any mistakes that we make. We pray that you'll be with those of our number who are not here today, sick or traveling. Keep them safe. Please forgive us of our sins and help us to stay faithful to you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. So, Gideon part 2. So what we have learned already from last week is we got to the point where Gideon's father, Joash, stood up for God and stood up for Gideon when God instructed him to tear down the altar. That was the first thing that God wanted to make sure that they understood, was that the idols had to go away. And they didn't go away later down the road or when they had time to get to it. God isn't even going to talk to them until the altar and the Ashereth were destroyed, which they did. And we see that that was a turnaround for Joash, especially Gideon's father, because he had built it in the first place years ago. We talked about how there most likely was duality of gods that they were worshiping. Some were still praying to Jehovah, to Yahweh, and some were picking up with the idols. But we'll see as Gideon goes about his task of destroying the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole, the people got mad, but then Joash, who had built it, came around and said, hey, if Baal is so good, he can take care of himself. Let's see if he does anything. And of course, Baal is just a figment of somebody's imagination. Nothing happens. And the people are coming around now to the mission that the Lord is going to give to Gideon. And like I said, the people as a whole, Israelites, they're turning too. They're beginning to say, okay, he's seen this angel of the Lord thing, and we're getting some action here, and Baal has done nothing. Baal can't defend himself. The people are turning it around as well. And I think that was one of the reasons that the Lord went ahead and came to Gideon, is he saw that they were beginning to realize that their idol was doing them no good. And so when they cried out, he does send the prophet at first, but he says, that they're going to make it if we can go down there and do something. So we'll read a little bit, and we're getting ready to everybody's favorite part, the story about the fleece. And we're going, he's got to gather an army, Gideon does, before we get to the fleece. Sorry, got ahead of myself. Okay, so we're going to read Judges 6, 33 through 35. Remember, this thing that all these things we talked about last week, that altar that was torn down, that Asherah pole, all of that was at the top of the hill, also, by no coincidence, where the threshing floor was, that Gideon was avoiding at all costs because he didn't want the Midianites to see what he was doing. So now, all of a sudden, this place that Gideon had been avoiding, it is the center of attention. And what happens? Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the sons of the east assembled themselves, and they crossed over and camped in the valley of Jezreel. So the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called together to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, and they were also called together to follow him. And so everybody's gathering, and it's the bad guys. They see something's going on up there, they don't like it. So evidently, the word has traveled quickly about Gideon's encounter with the Lord and his destruction of the altar. They probably also were Baal worshipers, and that probably just made the situation that much worse. Now they're really mad about what's going on. So now we get to the sound of the fleece. Finally, we got here. So Gideon's going to put God to the test. He's coming along nicely. He has realized that, what's going on is actually going to deliver him. He was probably part of the group that was praying to Jehovah, Yahweh, instead of Baal when he saw he wasn't getting any results the other way. So he's met the angel of the Lord, who was probably actually Jesus, and he knows something's going to happen, but he's a little sketchy yet. So then we pick up in verse 36, and it says, Then Gideon said to God, If you will deliver Israel through me, as you have spoken, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on the ground, I will know that you will deliver through me as you have spoken. So this is his test. Is there going to be, fleece, dew or not here and there? He's thinking surely only God could do that. In verse 38, and it was so. So in other words, just like you asked Gideon, there it is. When he arose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece, he drained the dew from the fleece, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, Do not let your anger burn against me with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, and let there be dew on the ground. God did so that night. So God's patient with him. Now, sometimes God doesn't like being pushed too much, but, it's been a while since they've been in touch. He's going to give him some grace here. God did so that night, for it was dry only on the fleece, and dew was all on the ground. So, what do you think about that? They are on board with the plan. He sees it twice. He knows it's true. Who else witnessed this event? All their enemies. Remember, they are now on the place that Gideon had been avoiding at all costs. That was the threshing floor, up high, where everybody can see what you're doing. What's next? Is Gideon broken at this point? He's broken from Baal, that's for sure. He has figured out, okay, this is the real God, and the people are coming around too. Why fleece? Nobody ever talks about the fleece other than the fact, we know the dew was on there and then not on there, and we get it. But first of all, y'all jump right in there. These are not trick questions. What is fleece? Somebody tell me what fleece is. Wool, okay. Wool, which comes from sheep, okay. And what is it used for? Warmth, yes. And several other things. So is it a common thing for the Israelites to have fleece? Of course it is. There's nothing unusual about that at all. But what are they using it for right now? Where are they? Right now, where are they living? They're out, they're in caves, they've been run out, basically. They're out in the elements all the time. Chances are that Gideon has been keeping watch sometimes. He's been outside. This fleece back then could come in two forms. It was spun into cloth, which is what you're talking about. And in a lot of cases, fleece included the hide. In other words, when they didn't waste anything. And sometimes they just kept some of the wool on the hide when the sheep was killed, and they tanned it, and they, you've seen all the old trapper movies of the Westerns where they had the beaver skin coats on. Well, they probably did a similar thing with this. This fleece was Gideon's best friend. Remember, he's out there in the elements, guarding. He's living up there. When you go camping, you say, I think we'll just rough it tonight. We'll just sleep directly on the ground. Nobody does that. That's yet one more thing fleece was used for. They made it for a garment. They used it for a bed. It was constantly with them. Their life, a lot of times, depended on it. So it's a serious thing, and it's something. That's why he had it with him. Have you ever thought, why in the world did he think of taking a piece of fleece to test God with? It's because it's always there with him. It's because it's part of his existence, and it was handy. So anyway, that's why I think he was using the fleece, and it would be something that would, like you just don't go out in the morning without your clothes on. It's just about at that level. So the fleece was part of their life, and that's why I think he picked the fleece to test God with. In fact, and I wish it said something, but it doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised if he died with that same piece of fleece close by somewhere. Okay, so now God has proven himself to Gideon. Everybody has been up there when this happened too. They're drawing a lot of attention. So then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and camped beside the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was on the north side. So we're getting two opposing armies together here. The Lord said to Gideon, the people whom with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hand. He said, what? Gideon's got to be thinking, what are you talking about? For Israel had become boastful, saying, my own power has delivered me. In other words, the people would start bragging on themselves. They'd say, oh, if we win this battle, it was us. We did a great job, and blah, blah, blah. God's not, and it's true. How many times have we seen this out of the Israelites? I mean, they always want to brag on themselves and take credit and think they're better than they are, and nothing has changed in that aspect. Now, therefore, proclaim the hearing of the people, saying, who is afraid and trembling? Let him return and depart from Mount Gilead. So 22,000 people returned, but 10,000 remained. What did this accomplish? I mean, yes, it shrank the numbers. That was the main goal. But what else did it do?
Everybody with cold feet got to go home.
You got rid of the cowards. Were those guys going to be any good in a fight anyway? Who knows? But it was one good way to cull down the crowd. And it probably, if they were still afraid, chances are they hadn't fully bought in to the thing about Yahweh really being able to do this. So, culled it down 10 grand, that's enough, right? Midianites see this disturbance and start heading towards them. What? Too many people, 10,000, and there's hundreds of thousands over there. So they're getting wound a little tight. So now we're finally going to cull it down to 300. Adam.
One of the things that we often get, Jack, is this is a few years after Joshua passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And thus they did not conquer the whole land by driving out all the people.
That is true.
And so you've got these remnants of people in the land that's resistant to them. They've been fighting. They fought 5 years under Joshua. They got tired of fighting.
That's true too. And
that's why they're running. They have no more strength to fight.
That's right. This is going to have to be something to give them new confidence. And it's just a further extension of how classic it is that you got to do it God's way. If they had just, killed off or driven out all the people like they were supposed to when they first got the promised land, none of this would be happening. None of it. And it just keeps on biting them. It's tragic. So he's going to cull it down some more. Then the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Therefore it shall be that he of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, he shall go with you. But every one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, you shall separate every one who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, as well as every one who kneels to drink. Now the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people kneeled to drink water. So the question is, first of all, that's quite a reduction. God really is going to get it down to a number that the only way they could possibly win is if he is on their side. So he's trying to get a lesson into their heads that will stick. Any ideas on why the cut was made this way, this last cut of the men?
I have heard it proposed that those who were lapping sticking their head into the water weren't very good soldiers. Because the others would kneel down and get the water, bring it to their head, but they could still keep their eyes.
Exactly. They were probably good warriors for that, and they were aware of their surroundings, that nobody was going to sneak up on them. He wanted guys that paid attention and were aware of what's going on around them. It was almost more the fact that they drank in such a manner that they could see what was going on than the fact whether they bent over it or lapped it or not. It was just a way to do it and not let your guard down. Got some, Adam?
In addition, those who lap are defenseless.
That's right.
Those who kneel can hold a weapon as they drink.
Exactly. I'd illustrate that if I could. If you bend over and you're doing like this and you're looking down, as opposed to, you're kind of, yeah, exactly. So just the little details, if you examine them, God is very careful about the mindset of the people he's actually picking out to handle this job. Yeah. No, I won't say that. Okay, now they're finally ready for action. We finally got you culled down to 300 people. I think that's just the right amount to go out and whip several 100,000 of your enemy. That just sounds amazing, doesn't it? I love it. So, Lord talks to Gideon again. What's he say? The Lord said to Gideon, I will deliver you with the 300 men who laughed and will give the Midianites into your hands. So let the other people go, each man to his home. So the 300 men took the people's provisions and their trumpets into their hands. And Gideon sent all the other men of Israel, each to his tent, but retained the 300 men, and the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. So not only does he call the fighting force down to 300 men, he says, just send the rest of them home. So, okay, I'm with you so far. He does, that's the point I wanted to make. He does keep doing what he's been told to do. He doesn't question. After he's gotten past the police thing, he quits questioning God. It's just like, not only is the task force very small, the culled Israelites get sent back. Don't forget that the ones that are left, they are in the most exposed position they could possibly be in and compared to their enemy. And what does God do? Send everybody home except these guys. You got to have some faith to do that, especially when, remember how in the first part, we talked about, all the resources that the Midianites had, that they had camels that were too many to number. The men were ready for battle. This huge, huge force is down there just waiting to come up and tear you out of the frame and throw your bones down in the water. And there you are. God says, I got it. We're going to take care of it. These guys, so the question is, are they broken? Yes, they're broken. They're broken from Baal, and they're broken in the fact that they now are completely trusting God, which is the whole goal in the first place, is to bring the people over to where He is the only one that they trust. So just getting ready for this battle, just being there in the 300, they have put all the marbles on Yahweh. And remember, they've been in bad shape for 4 years, starving to death. There's no telling how many of them have died off or been killed. Gary.
There's one thing that we went through that I've got a couple of thoughts about.
Sure.
But you probably got better ones.
No.
Well, yeah. Anyway, the Gideon tore down the pole,
Right.
all right? And it was on a high place.
Right.
It was a place that people could see.
Yes.
And there was resistance to that from the Israelites at first. They were concerned about that, but then things got all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was it that alienated the Midianites and the Amalekites to the point that they decided to gather as a result of what the Israelites were doing?
Well,
It's almost like
yeah.
they're behaving like they shouldn't behave, and we're going to go kill them.
Well, when we read the start of the whole story, they just love persecuting. That God put that in their hearts, into the Midianites. You know, just wear these guys out. He didn't incite them to kill them. He just incited the Midianites and the Amalekites to persecute them. And the high places were places that they watched to see what was going on. And last week we talked about how the high places, a lot went on in the high places because everybody could see something was going on. They didn't have their cell phones, you know, and everything. So they had the altars up there for the gods. They had the Ashereth pole. They had the threshing floor. We talked about that because you needed to be up high where there was some wind so you could get the chaff out. When they had those events, they had, you know, like marketplace there, and it was almost like later on in Jerusalem where we see the men met at the gate. Well, back then the men met up at the high place at the threshing floor. That was the thing. So that was somewhere that they probably had people keeping an eye on all the time, just to make sure that the Israelites weren't up to something.
Well, the thought that occurred to me, and that could be very wrong, is that the enemies, the ones that are coming now to threaten the Israelites more than they were, apparently, could, if they saw a change where they were breaking away from Baal, that might have been behavior that was very similar to what they did even when they first got there, before they erred and began to worship.
Well, it probably was
And
similar.
I'm wondering if that they feared that behavior because of what had happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's speculation.
Yeah, it is. We'll see as we get more into the story. Probably not until next week when we wrap up, but we'll see that the Lord changes the mindset of the Midianites. And that comes into play big as the story winds down. Not quite yet, but it is going to. You'll have to tune in to week 3. That's right. Tune in next week, folks. Yeah. So that's all coming into play. But and the Israelites know that. They know that they're going through all this stuff up on the threshing floor on top of the hill. They know that they're being watched, and so I guess that goes back to the fact that the Israelites are coming around. If they weren't believing the story and what they had seen with the fleece, and all this other stuff, they just all say, forget it, we're going to the house too. You know, we're not staying up here and getting killed, but they stay. So I guess that's the power of the signs that was given to Gideon up there, is that that's going to happen. But anyway, we're down to 300 men, and things are going to start popping. And now, that same night, and the Lord knows everything. And this just shows how he was prepared for this. Now, the same night it came about that the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. And notice he says, at night. But if you are afraid to go down, and he knows they are, go with Purah your servant to the camp, and you will hear what they say, and afterward your hands will be strengthened, that you may go down against the camp. So he does what he's told again, took Purah and his servant, went down to the outposts of the army in the camp, and what does he overhear? Is this a confidence builder? Yes. He's going down there so that when the time comes to lead the charge, he'll say, man, I know we got this. He wants him ready for action. Why did Purah go with Gideon? He's a witness. I mean, Gideon could go back and make up any story and tell it to the 300 guys, but Purah is a witness, and he is going to do a little bit of the relaying to Gideon in just a minute. So what did they learn? They do overhear him. Now the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the sons of the east were lying in the valley, as numerous as locusts. There's a lot of guys down there. And their camels were without number, just like they were when this whole thing started 4 years ago. As numerous as the sand on the seashore. When Gideon came, behold, a man was relating a dream to his friend, and he said, behold, I had a dream. A loaf of barley bread was tumbling into the camp of Midian, and it came to the tent and struck it so that it fell. And it turned upside down so that the tent lay flat. A little out of a dream. His friend replied, he tells him, yeah, I know what that means. This is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given Midian and all the camp, meaning themselves, they're talking, this is the Midianites, into his hand. Good night. Is that a coincidence? Yeah, right. That's no coincidence. Where do you think the dream came from? God has already destroyed the confidence of the people that they're about to fight. And do you think that nobody's going to talk about this dream that this guy had? I'd be shocked if the whole camp didn't know about this dream by the time morning came around, that they just think that Yahweh is going to intervene in this thing before it even happens. So what is their mindset? You're a Midianite. You're getting ready to go up there and pillage the poor Israelites one more time. Then you hear this comrade of yours has had this dream. What do you think? Did they put much emphasis on visions and dreams back then? Yes, they did. Man, this was going to sow some discontent, some unrest. At what level, we're not sure, we're not told. But if one guy's having this dream and you know it had to be God inspired, do you think others are not? Probably so. So God is softening them up a little bit before the battle. Adam.
What a fact, a little bit on the threshing floor. God never authorized the people to worship on high at the threshing floor. That was the Gentiles. That was where they put all their God high on the mountaintop. Thus, when Gideon tears down those idols at the top of that mountain, you're challenging their God. You're challenging where their authority comes from.
That's right.
And thus, that is being seen from all over. And they will come out to war just from that.
That's right. And that's correct. And when Gideon made that first offering that we talked about last week, once he realized he was in the presence of God, what wood did he use to burn his offering that was acceptable to God? He used the wood from the Asherah pole that he cut down. So the Asherah thing was symbolically totally consumed making an offering to Yahweh. That was extremely significant. As everything in this story is significant when you really,
It also weakens the enemy's strength,
yes.
because our God is destroyed now. So Gideon has the advantage.
Yeah, and they tore the altar to Baal down too at the same time. That's right. Any other thoughts? What they learned? All right, God has already got the Midianites thinking they're going to lose, which they are, of course. Big confidence booster for Gideon and Purah and for the men eventually when they hear this story. All right, it's time to go. When Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship. Smart thing to do. Is he on board with Yahweh? Yes. Is he still broken from Baal? Yes. He's getting there. He returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands." He divided the 300 men into 3 companies, so he splits them up a little bit more. And he put trumpets and empty pitchers into the hands of all of them with torches inside the pitchers. That's interesting. He said to them, "Look at me and do likewise." So they all get a pitcher, a torch, and the other thing. "And behold, when I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do." In other words, you're going to find out what to do when we get down there and when we actually do it. But take this stuff. And then verse 18, "When I and all who are with me blow the trumpet, then you also blow the trumpets all around the camp and say, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Man, this is more interesting stuff. He gives God the credit. He's on board now. God is going to give us this victory. What about torches inside of pitchers? What do y'all think about that? Torches into, like a torch is probably, a stick with some cloth wrapped on it and some flammable material like pitch or something. Whatever torches were back then. And my question was, after reading this, and it doesn't say, were they lit when they put them in there? Nobody was carrying a big lighter with them, that's for sure. And I guess that they were. But in any case, torches inside of pitchers. If you got a torch, what are you putting it in the pitcher for? As you get into this story, you wonder, what on earth? Are they going to burn the camp down? Is this going to turn out? No, that's not the answer either. What do you use torches for? Yeah, exactly. And when do you need a torch? Easy questions. Dark, yeah. Nighttime, right. Adam, tell us about torches.
At night, it is very difficult to determine how many people are behind those torches.
Yes.
And so it does create this feeling of being a lot of people there being outnumbered. They've already got the dream, and now they see these torches, this big light coming from all around the camp.
I wonder if that's going to play into the story as we read further. Andy.
Likewise, the vast majority of soldiers would not have trumpets. They were specifically for signaling.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have one for every 100 soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
So when 300 trumpets
Trumpets
all go off at once, all around the enemy camp, what that tells them is they're surrounded by a vast army.
Yes, indeed. We're getting to that. Confusion of the enemy might occur. What a coincidence. You're a genius, Andy. All right. He may have actually read ahead. Who knows? We'll give him all kinds of credit. But anyway, that is correct. Confusion of the enemy, picking up in 7:19. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him went to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. In other words, daytime shift is over, and there's the changing of the guard, we would call it now. So the men are coming, men are going, and they're changing who's up there. When they had just posted the watch, in other words, new guy has come on, other people are headed back to camp to get a good night's sleep. at that moment, they blow the trumpets, and remember, it is night. That the whole purpose of saying the second watch, it's nighttime now. Okay, at the beginning of the watch, the trumpet start blowing the trumpets and smash the pitchers that were in their hands. When the three companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers, they held the torches in their left hand and the trumpets in their right hand for blowing, and cried, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon," just like they were told to. Well, the torches are lit. I don't know if I'll solve the mystery of did they put them in there lit or did they light them later. Doesn't make any difference. It's nighttime, they got lit torches, and they're dispersed all over the place. Now here's the real interesting part. Are these guys attacking? No. Each stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. So our guys stand there blowing trumpets, making all kinds of racket, got torches. Where are they? They're out in the middle of nowhere. We have so much light pollution today from big cities that very seldom do we have a really dark night at our houses anymore. I don't know if the moon's out. Not told that either. But I'm telling you, it's dark there. I mean, really dark. And the only thing you can see is these 300 torches all over the place. A bunch of noise like battle trumpets that Andy was talking about. But these guys are standing still. They're not going anywhere. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set the sword of one against another, even throughout the whole army. They're killing themselves. They think, we're under attack. They can't see anything. They're killing their own men, and they don't even know it. Our guys are standing there, torches, trumpets, man, this is fun, and watch it. Well, they can't see too much, but they're killing each other. David.
When we were reading about Gideon and Purah sneaking into the camp,
Yes.
it occurred to me that they don't wear uniforms because the Jews were indistinguishable from the Midianites.
Yeah.
But the Jews were supposed to look like they're supposed to have clothing that has a blue thread around the edge of it. Supposed to have a little thing on their
And yet, in the dark of night, you can't tell.
That's true. Or
Yeah.
the Jews stopped doing that, right? Because
Yeah.
they had to fall away.
Yeah.
So the indistinguishability plays into what you just
Yes.
pointed out.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your question on the torches. So when I think of a torch, I think of something you hold. It burns on the end.
Yeah.
But if I lived in the first century, and these guys were before that, if I thought of a lamp, I think of a little clay thing filled with oil,
Yeah.
and a little wick hanging out. So I wonder if when they're talking about torches in the jars, they're talking about putting a torch in a jar filled with oil, and then the torch is burning off the oil, making it brighter and longer lasting.
I'm pretty sure that the pitchers were empty, and then they put the torches in the. But good point. And my guess is that it almost has to be lit. Why are they putting the torch in the pitcher in the first place? Two reasons. All right, now Bill's getting ready to enlighten us. Let us have it, Bill.
What I think is that you couldn't see them assemble because the lit torches were in a jar.
That's right.
And suddenly they broke all the jars. And so suddenly there's all this noise and all this light.
Yes.
All of it.
Don't forget that breaking the pitcher is going to break a bunch of noise. It's going to make a bunch of noise too. Yeah.
They grasped the torches in their hand too, so it was oil.
Yeah, they couldn't hold it if it was in oil. Yeah. Scott?
I'm sort of, this is a supposition, but I doubt that in such a situation, in a normal attack, every soldier would have a torch.
That's right.
So if they all had torches, they look like a much bigger force
Exactly. Oh, I'm sure.
than they are. And it's interesting that Gideon is sort of putting his battle wisdom, I think, into this plan, where God has said, I'll fight for you. So it's kind of a blending of God told him what to do, God winnowed down the force, but Gideon still adds a touch to how they're going.
Well, I think so too, and that's supported by the very start of the story back in chapter 6, where, you know, it's part facetious and part not, where he says, calls Gideon a valiant warrior, you know. I think that's interesting too. Andy?
You mentioned the men just standing there. If you have a torch in one hand and a trumpet in the other, what are you holding your sword with?
You're not.
You're not.
Exactly. But Keith?
This case of perfect psyops, psychological operation.
Yes, it is. And who is the master of it? We know the answer to that question. He's already put dreams in their head. The enemy I'm talking about, he has really set them up to fail, the Midianites. Adam.
That whole confusion was another about getting into 300 men. About verse 3, where God told them, if I leave you with this large number, they will think that they won the war.
Yes, we
Here
talked.
it said, the Lord set the sword against each of them. So they didn't need their sword right then.
That's
They
right.
had to set that let God do the fighting for them. Remember what Gideon said at the beginning? Where are those miracles that God had done that we have not seen, that our fathers told us about? This is the miracle.
Yes, it is. And as we have already discussed, Bill.
The Lord's plan was quite strategic. It's easier to move 300 without being seen than 100,000.
Yes, it is. At least at the start of the battle, and letting them go nuts at nighttime. Yeah, you almost think the Lord may have planned it all out. Yes, he did. And I would bet that as time elapsed quickly here, that when they thought about the battle afterward, they were thinking, wow, you know, that was some plan. They don't have time to really consider it at all. But okay, so right after this, the rest of the Israelites are going to join the fight after this little deal that the Lord pulled to get a bunch of them to kill each other. So they've had the number of combatants here killed off by themselves before the rest of them have to keep and come and do anything. And of course, when they show up, they're going to see all the dead Midianites, and they're going to say, you know, maybe we can do this after all. Let's see. Okay, tune in next week for exciting conclusion of the battle. I can't believe it. I timed it right. Will Gideon stay faithful to God? Will the Israelites stay faithful to the Lord or not? Well, you know, we read some cases where the people win a battle, or God does something good for them, and it's a short period of time before they lapse into their old habits. Will that happen now, or will it not? If you've already read chapter 8, you know the answer to that. But it's interesting. And we'll read about the big battle. A little spoiler alert, what will happen is the rest of the people will join the fight, and they will basically drive them out of the land. But there'll be some interesting accounts in there. We'll learn some more interesting stuff about how Gideon does as time goes on for him. And he does pretty well, but I don't want to spoil too much of the story. But now you know a lot more about Fleece than you ever thought you would, and how important it was to the Israelites. I still envision Gideon just a few days before hiding in the wine press, trying to get enough grain probably just to feed his family, and then a few days later, all right, we're going to whip everybody. You know, that's quite a leap. You have to give him credit for being able to make it to this point, considering his circumstances before this all happened. So God works fast when he decides to move, and he's ready. That's it. You've got a whopping 1.5 minutes left to socialize.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, your attention.